I'm going to pull this up so I can kind of get through this, although some of you guys probably already know about some of the stuff that we're planning on doing. Let me pull it up.
Is Hyde Park this Thursday?
No. Next Saturday. So really, like here, I'll just add, really the next event that we're actually having as a group would be next Sunday night for the Super Bowl party. That's our next event. All right. So that's next Sunday after church. I will say this. One of the things that part of this was on me because I was under the assumption that when Southeastern was coming, that they were going to be doing the night service, which is what they've done before. And in fact, they've done it on Super Bowl night before. And we've been asked as a group, because it's a college singing group, we've been asked to go in and be there. However, it looks like they're only doing morning service, and they're doing something separate with the youth on Sunday night. So that might give us some flexibility to make, I'm not sure yet how we're going to do this, but I'm going to play it by ear, and I'll let you know kind of the layout of how we're going to have our Super Bowl party, whether it's we could maybe have class here and keep it up here, or just travel to my house afterwards. We'll figure that out. But regardless, we are going to have a Super Bowl party next Sunday. Then, as Noah mentioned, Hyde Park Hangout. That's next Saturday, February 19th. We said we were going to meet 1 o'clock, and Tony, did we say we were going to meet 1 o'clock here or there? I couldn't remember what we were on. Here, right? Yeah. So we'll meet here, 1 o'clock, and then we will go to Hyde Park. No, you just bring some money. You don't really have to bring money for anything if you don't want, but money for food would probably be a good idea. If you guys can also keep in prayer, we are going to have our senior night service. I know we only have a handful of seniors, but we're going to try to invite all of them for Wednesday, March 2nd. So we'll kind of keep reminding you about that. Community outreach event that Teresa is kind of heading up for us. That's Saturday, March 19th. That's going to be an early day because we're going to be going to Trinity Cafe off in Nebraska, where we kind of, we'll help with the food for people who are going through a rough time. So we're probably going to meet here on campus at about 7:15 in the morning that day. And then really the next thing that I have is the escape room event that we have on April 9th. That's a Saturday. So those are the events that we have. In fact, we're probably going to have, I don't have it here because it's just, we may have some low key, just like hangout movie/game nights for some of the weekends that we know, like Connor and some of the other ones are going to come back in March. But they're not going to be like anything big. So if you can't come, you can't come. But we might try to do something so that way some of them have something to look forward to when they come back as far as, oh yeah, I want to hang out. That's usually what ends up happening. They come in, they're like, are we doing anything? So we'll try to do a little bit of something for that. The last thing, I know I have a lot of announcements, but it's kind of how we're trying to do things. If we can have like 2 people, I might even just, if anybody wants to volunteer, that's fine. I might ask some of you guys. If we can have like 2 more people come with us to Plant City on Thursday, the HCC campus, that'd be great. That way it would be can't talk. There'd be about 4 people there at the table. If we have more than 4 people, people are gonna be like there's a cult going on here. There's like a bunch of people at this table, and they want to corner all of us and kidnap us and take us to Jonestown. That's not what we want to do. So, anybody know what Jonestown is?
Is it this Thursday?
Yes.
What?
That's this Thursday? No, I don't know what Jonestown is.
You don't know what Jonestown is?
Yeah.
It's all right. It's a cult.
I can be there.
Okay, so we'll have Eldon. That'll be good. I think you said you weren't far from there anyway, right?
I'm actually I'll be there.
What time?
Yeah.
What time is that?
We're planning on, we said 10 o'clock.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, you have to work probably. So, I kind of felt like 10 o'clock was an advantageous time. It's not too early, and like there'll be a few more students around. So, if we can maybe just we'll have Ellen, maybe somebody else that thinks they can help, that'd be great. All right, so let's kind of dive into what we're going to be talking about, our topic or our theme, and it's probably going to be our theme for the next 3 weeks. Again, assuming I'm pretty sure we're not having to be doing anything different next week, so we'll probably still try to meet and talk about this. And that's obviously just a question of like, what is apostasy? Most of you in here probably already know this was partially inspired by a really good discussion that we had about that movie Silence from a little over a month ago that we did. I know Connor was the one that had said, hey, let's have this movie, let's talk about it. And it was really good discussion. And what happened is that after everybody had left, and we were here pretty late because we were talking a lot. We might have talked almost more than we watched the movie, and it was a long movie. Tony Joe, every once in a while, Tony Joe will be telling me, hey, I really feel like we should try to do a series or do a study on this or that or whatever. And she was really kind of sparked by what we talked about. And she said, like, have you thought about, like, doing a little small study on apostasy? So I felt like this was a good time to do that, kind of while it was maybe still somewhat fresh in our minds. So let me go ahead and first say this, in case you don't remember, or maybe you weren't here when we watched it. I'll just tell you a little bit about Silence, just a very brief synopsis of it, so that way you kind of understand where we're coming from. The movie Silence was very much about persecution of Christians in Japan way back in like the 1600s. And like the main character was a priest or missionary, and they were kind of sneaking around because the Japanese government did not want Christians to be there. And so finally he was caught, and basically for, I don't know, I can't remember what the time period was of him being held captive or in prison, but it was a long time, and they were psychologically just wearing him down to basically get him to, the goal was to commit apostasy. And the big thing was, put your foot on a picture of Jesus, right? If you remember, that's what it was, your trample, stamp, whatever you want to call it. Put your foot on a picture of Jesus. Spoiler alert, we do see that towards the end. As he's seeing people being tortured before him, they're saying, hey, we will stop torturing these people if you just put your foot on a picture of Jesus. That's all you got to do. And he finally broke down, and he put his foot on a picture of Jesus, and immediately just crumpled to the floor and just started bawling his eyes out. And so, again, there was a lot of discussions, and it really kind of forked into a few different things. But definitely a lot of it came back to the issue of apostasy. So I kind of thought like it was important to maybe spend a few sessions talking about it. But what I want to do is this, because I want to get a temperature of the room as far as just this issue. So I'm going to ask you a few questions, and you guys can kind of just let me know what you think. And some of these don't look at your phones either, by the way. Like I just want gut reactions. Like, what do you think about certain things? That way you're not like, yeah, Leo, put your phone
Hey,
out.
Siri.
All right. What do you think is apostasy? When we say, like, if I just go, hey, what's apostasy? What would be your explanation for it? Anybody?
Well, based on the movie, and it's denying your faith.
Denying your faith. Okay. Anybody else? Any other thoughts?
Rejecting.
I would say disavowing the faith.
Disavowing the faith. Okay.
Not
All right.
disavowing.
What it is Connor just one up.
I would say
I'm joking.
my definition's a little stricter. I would say
Okay.
like it has to do
It's
with
better
like I don't want anything to do with that anymore.
Right.
I'm hanging it up.
Right. Gotcha. So what did you?
Oh no, I agree with that. So yeah.
You would kind of say the
No,
same.
yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Cool. All right. Noah, did you ever hear that? Or?
Yeah, I was gonna say apostasy. I feel like it kind of be. I don't know about denying, like rejecting the faith. I don't know if it's that. I will say I think I'm more on the terms of like denying in that specific moment.
Okay.
So for example, when Peter denied, like, oh,
Gotcha.
I'm not with Jesus. That's what I would consider apostasy.
Okay. All right. So you're talking about more in the moment of it. That's something that you can do. Okay. Anybody else? Any thoughts? Probably, and I mean honestly, what you guys just said probably does cover what a lot of us would think. And I'll tell you a little bit more about some of this stuff, but I kind of want to keep asking questions. All right. Now let's ask this: can you come back from it?
Well,
Can you say, I deny?
Just come back and
with
Okay,
Noah's,
okay.
Noah's
All right.
example,
Let me
with Peter, I would
give
say
you
yes.
a specific way of saying it. I'm standing before you now, and I'm saying I deny Jesus Christ. I don't think Jesus Christ is Lord. I don't believe this anymore. And I come back a year later and I go, I have made a horrible mistake. Can I be saved again? Can I?
In that
With-
situation?
no, okay, well I don't think you lost your salvation. So
Okay.
Peter's
that's
example
why I'm
is
asking
yes.
what come back. What do you mean come back?
Yeah. So that's
So
what I
that's
would do.
different.
Yeah. So that's probably not the best way of saying it, but yeah, like can you come back in the sense of like, hey, I've made a mistake. Like, actually, I just realized, no, Jesus is Lord. Because, by the way, the internet, like, there's several different, like, where you can, like, post questions and talk with Christians and that kind of thing. The internet's actually filled with people who are panic, and they're typing and they go, like, I actually was a Christian, and I stopped believing, and I realized it was a mistake. Please, for the love of Pete, tell me I can be saved again because I made a mistake.
Paul would be furious at the church for letting that happen.
Okay. Okay. Yes.
I mean, didn't the Jews denounce God multiple times, and then he still allowed them to come back? So why wouldn't he allow you as an individual to come back?
Okay. So you're kind of looking at history of God and his relationship with his people, and you're saying, of course you can, because they did something similar.
Yeah.
They worship the golden calf.
It's like
What?
They worship the golden calf.
Right.
So.
Okay. All right. So any yes.
If I'm gonna play devil's advocate a little bit,
Okay.
I know that people point to when I don't know enough about the verse in its context, but and I don't even know the reference, but the verse that talks about like basically in doing that you're crucifying Jesus again.
Yes.
And so I know that a lot of people point to that as you can't be saved again, and those same people also, and there's a lot of interpretations for this too, but like the unpardonable sin.
Yes.
You know, I've heard of people that think rejecting Jesus after being a Christian is that, and I don't. I think it's a false teaching.
So Hebrews chapter 10, I believe, is the place where it's it's Hebrews 6. Hebrews chapter 6 is the idea of crucifying Jesus again, which we can actually touch on that a little bit.
To go along with that, there's also the verse that's like, if you deny me, I'll deny you also. Deny my Father? Is that how it works?
Yes, Matthew chapter 12.
Yeah.
These are fresh in my mind because I have these like in my notes. Some of the stuff I'm actually going to cover tonight, even though we have 3 weeks. Some of this I'm actually going to cover. Anything else? That pretty much covers the gambit. Okay. Most of you would probably then, it sounds like you would say, yes, you can come back. All right. Now this specific question, I will try to do my best to answer probably in next week's session or in a future one. But let me go ahead and ask you now. What do you think Free Will Baptists teach and believe when it comes to this? And I just wrote on this issue, so maybe that's a broad question. Let's make it specific. What do you think they think apostasy is? And do you think that they believe, Free Will Baptist and Special Doctrine, that you can come back?
I don't know about coming back. I know they believe the sin of apostasy is losing your salvation. I don't know if they believe you can come back. I would
specifically the sin of apostasy that's losing salvation. They do believe that you can.
It's just your choice.
You can lose your salvation.
And then they call that apostasy.
I feel like that's like an issue with the heart. Like if you are truly like, okay, this is the desire of my heart. This is what's the desire behind it. You know, but this action. Then I think you. I mean, I think that's what we would believe as Free Will Baptists.
Okay.
I'm guessing you can't come back according to.
I don't know. I don't know though.
That's my guess.
I don't know if that is. I don't know.
I'm with Logan.
So, and I will again. I don't want to give too much away because I do have a little bit more background info on some of this. There's probably a little bit of a mixture, and it's also some of it. And I'll continue to actually study more on this, but some of this actually almost depends on what generation you're talking to. There's been a little bit of a rift when it comes specifically to Free Will Baptists and what they believe. But okay, anything else, Free Will Baptists? What do you think they believe? Do you think they believe that you cannot be saved if you don't like fried chicken?
Yes.
Yes.
Obviously.
Yes.
It's a regional issue.
If you don't like fried chicken, you just must not be saved. And I think that Junior Hill, I think, said that. I don't know if you remember Junior Hill. Like, if you don't like fried chicken, you're just not saved.
You can't go mix with them.
Yeah, like, there's no coming back from that, guy. Sorry. No. All right. So basically, what you all answered, like nothing that you said threw me off. And what's going to happen is some of the stuff I'm going to actually address tonight, and then some of this other stuff we talked about I'll address in future sessions. But there is one more thing that I'm also going to talk about. I want to clarify, and in fact, I'm just going to go ahead and say this. The phrase, losing your salvation. Why is that problematic? Because we talk about it with the idea of apostasy, right? We say, well, you lose your salvation with apostasy. But why is that phrase problematic? Jeremy, and then I'll. Yeah.
I think because it opens up more doors of like it's out of your control.
Yeah.
Kind of.
Right.
It's too vague.
Mm-hmm.
I think a better phrase would be like you can walk away from the faith.
Yeah.
But not,
Okay.
It's not like Islam where it's like a dice roll to get into heaven.
Forfeiting your faith, you would say might be a better way of saying. So you were gonna say something?
Ditto.
Yeah. Okay.
Exactly.
Anybody else? Anything else you want to add to the idea? Yes, my betrothed. Well, I guess you're not my betrothed.
Yeah, just echoing what Jeremy said, like it implies that it's not willful.
Yeah.
It almost occurred by accident.
Yeah.
When you say the phrase "lose your salvation."
Gotcha.
It's just so I don't know. It's not the top message, but losing your salvation at all, like, we have promises of sanctification in the New Testament for Christians. So, for you to lose your salvation, I mean, that seems like God breaking his promise.
Right.
Unless it's two-way, but it's not really described that way.
But you can promise me that, Jesus promises us salvation if we give into it.
But it says the people who are saved are predestined unto adoption, to be sanctified.
You can promise me something and I can reject it.
I guess.
So there is, again, this is what's interesting about the apostasy discussion, and this is actually why this has to go into a couple of other weeks. Some of the other stuff that we begin to look at when it comes to apostasy also begins to inform you on what you believe about other things in the Bible. I'm just going to tell you right now, one of the things we're going to be looking at, and it's probably going to be next week, is the question of like, people love to ask the question, if you committed apostasy, were you saved to begin with? And like, that kind of thing. Actually, how you answer that question, in general, it's not like specific, actually can help determine whether maybe you're Arminian or whether you're Calvinist. And so now we have to even get into, well, what's Arminian and what's Calvinist, right? So it becomes this like deep discussion that like, I almost don't even want to tackle this because I feel like I'm still going to shortchange it somehow. Okay, so yeah, so we'll talk a little bit more about this. All right, so I would say this: the reason why, you guys are pretty much right, and I wanted to clarify the losing your salvation thing just in case this could potentially trip anybody up. Sometimes we say losing your salvation, we're talking about apostasy because it's like force of habit. We just have said losing your salvation when I think the idea of losing your salvation is, oh dang it, I lost my keys.
Yeah.
Tony, I'm sorry, I lost my keys. She's going to be frustrated at me, but she knows I didn't intend to lose my keys. Of course not. I mean, how are we going to get home, right? Or the other way that we talk about losing or lost would be like, you're a sports fan. So what, my favorite team lost their game today. Well, they didn't intend to lose. They just got beat, right? Nobody intends to lose. So the idea of losing yourself, well, except for tanking. I know some of you probably think, oh, I like tanking. That's a whole nother specific thing. I know some people that are not sports fans are like, I have no idea what you're talking about. But so I'm going to try to do my best to maybe say something more along the lines of forfeiting your salvation, because yes, losing your salvation, the way that language suggests, no, you cannot lose your salvation. You can't like think a lustful thought before you go to bed. You wake up the next morning, you go, oh no, I just lost my salvation. Like that's not how this works. Okay. So when I'm talking, if I accidentally say lose your salvation, like don't think that's what I believe. It's a force of habit, and I'll try my best not to say it and all that. All right. So what we're probably going to do is like today, my goal is this, because I actually talked with like Pastor Will and several other people and their thoughts. Today I'm going to kind of go into this talking about apostasy, and my goal is to talk about the things I'm going to talk about tonight. If I went to most other churches of any denomination, they wouldn't disagree with what I'm going to say tonight. It's going to be like what apostasy is and what it is not. That way we're kind of on the same page of what it says, and then we can kind of go from there. Then we'll look at, like I said, I think next week we're going to spend a lot of time on this couple of different views on apostasy in the sense of, like, you're saved, like, can you then forfeit your salvation, and then therefore, well, were you saved to begin with, or did you actually make the actual conscious decision to be saved? You meant it at the time, but now you decide, I'm not a believer. Because then, some people are, well, no, because I'm a Christian, I can't imagine giving up my faith. And so therefore there's some of that argument. So we'll probably talk a little bit about that. Like I said, that actually depends, it then begins to go into Arminianism and like Calvinism and this whole like, it's like a Lord of the Rings size discussion. And then probably the last thing I'll talk about, and it'll probably be in a couple weeks, is what is ultimately the proper perspective to have when we are talking about apostasy? What is some of the most important questions ultimately to ask at the end of the day, as fun as maybe some of these discussions are. So, let's dive into what apostasy is and what it is not. And I'm actually going to look at first I guess you would call it the secular definition of it, but then also be able to look at some scripture. When you look it up, now this is why I told you don't Google, because you can just look up what's apostasy and you're going to find it, and it's going to be the same definition I'm giving you now, all right? And you guys were pretty much on track with it. By definition, apostasy is the abandonment or renunciation of a religious, or actually in definition it says or religious or political belief. So it's like, I guess if you switch parties, you're an apostate. You're an apostate! How dare you switch from like Democrat to Republican or Republican to Democrat, or you're a libertarian, you apostate. So I thought that was funny. But specifically, the abandonment or renunciation of a religious belief. That's a very strong definition. The idea of abandoning something, right? It's like you're leaving it for dead. You're gone. You're going away. You know, you're saying disavowing. Logan says denying it. It's kind of all the same thing. It's like, basically, it's almost like you're leaving it for dead. So keep that definition in mind throughout our series. It's the abandonment or renunciation of a religious belief. The Bible definitely backs up this definition, and I think it's important to say the idea of apostasy, even if the specific word isn't like mentioned, apostasy is definitely found in Scripture. So I'm going to go to two different places. The first one is 1 Timothy chapter 4, verse 1. All right? Actually, both places are going to be pretty close to each other from the Apostle Paul. 1 Timothy chapter 4, verse 1, and obviously he's writing to Timothy here, and then what I'll give you a second to find it. The other place we'll go to in here in just a second is 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. And that was actually really interesting with some of the background of understanding the Thessalonian church. So I'm going to break these down. I'll talk a little bit about what it reveals to us about apostasy. So 1 Timothy 4:1. Paul writes this to Timothy. And I'm going to read from KJV. This is, of course, I have it. So, now the Spirit speaketh expressly, that in the latter times some shall depart from the faith, giving heed to seducing spirits and doctrines of devils. When he's saying now the Spirit speaketh expressly, all right, he's saying like the Spirit is telling me, I mean, the Spirit might as well have pulled up a chair right next to me and said, listen, this is something, it's just outright I'm telling you, all right? And so he's saying that in the latter times, some shall depart from the faith. I'll go ahead and say this, in this specific instance, because some people are going to go with the latter times. Oftentimes, when we're talking about like the latter times or like almost even the end times, it's almost not an exaggeration to say that the latter days actually started when Jesus ascended into heaven. Like that's when we talk about the latter days, it's literally Jesus goes into heaven, bam! All right, we're officially in the latter days of history. That's kind of where we are. So that's actually, when he's saying the latter times, it sounds like it's specific, but he's actually talking about pretty much from when he was alive all the way to now. Okay? And it says, some shall depart from the faith. So the way this language is being used is very much about apostasy. To depart from something means what? You were there, right? I depart, like Connor is departing Sefner and going to Columbus, right? What does that mean? He was here, right? Now he is departing. And so it's the idea here, they were of the faith, now they're leaving. And he even goes on to say, here's why they're leaving. Because they've been exposed to seducing spirits and doctrines of devils. Now with that, specifically what we begin to see here, and you actually read the rest of the chapter, he's really talking about some false teachings that were going on, because false teaching was a big thing to him, because Christianity was new. It was ripe for people to come in and put in their own interpretation on something, because people were just beginning to learn this, right? So For him, what he was talking about with his false teaching was the idea of, okay, yeah, Jesus, we talked about this before. Yeah, Jesus, like, okay, that's a good start. You need to ask Jesus into your heart. But hey, remember, like, you got to be circumcised if you're a male. You can't eat certain foods. Like, we got to follow the law, all right? And what he's saying is that's false teaching. And there will be people who will be apostatized from the faith to follow these teachings. That they will say, I thought Jesus was the only way, but actually there's other things I have to do on top of that. Okay? Now, again, you can kind of translate that to us today that not that specific teaching is throwing us off, but there's other teachings, other things that are going on, that what happens? People begin to say, hey, you know what? I even remember in college, I knew several people who were like, I grew up in church, I was a Christian, and then, you know, I came here to college, and like my mind was opened up to all these other beliefs, and I started realizing what a bunch of crock this Christianity thing is. Right? That sounds probably familiar to some of you. The idea of like, okay, like I now am following other teachings. I'm following other things instead of Christ. So he's talking about the idea like apostasy. That is what apostasy is now you're following other teachings instead of Christ. So now go over to 2 Thessalonians 2 and look at verse number 3. We're just going to read one verse because there's like so many verses that like I could really dive deep and get crazy with it, and I don't want to do that. So in this one, he's writing to the church in Thessalonica. 2 Thessalonians 2:3. Here's what's interesting. Thessalonica, the people there were actually very concerned that when we're talking about the end days, the end times, they thought, like, this could be happening right now. And so what was happening is they were saying, what's the point of things like getting married? What's the point? Jesus might come back next week. Why in the world would I invest, you know, into a relationship with somebody when Jesus could come back at a certain time? And so Paul is trying to reaffirm. He's like, no, listen, there are certain things that have to happen before we get to that time. So he's actually talking about that here. And one of the signs is a great falling away, as he says. Okay? This is what he said in verse 3. Let no man deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come. He's talking about the day that we are raptured, all right? Or the day that Christ comes back, all right? For that day shall not come, except there come a falling away first, and that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition. Actually, in some translations, it's not a falling away, it is the falling away. Like there's a certain, almost like event, like there becomes a time period where it is known for people falling away from the faith. The idea of they are leaving the faith. They were Christians, they decided, I'm not going to be a Christian anymore, and this is actually a sign that we are getting closer to the end times. You could even say it's happening now. And again, you could trace it back to maybe being exposed to different teachings, people believing certain things, right? What's going on?
Rocky's over there looking absolutely miserable.
It's okay.
It's not mine. I look like that.
Oh, are you feeling sick?
Just say yes.
I'm a headache.
Like this.
Oh, okay. We'll get you some medicine when we get home. Fire. He's good.
You can take them on. It's fine. But okay. Probably sick of hearing my voice.
Yeah.
All right. So that's kind of where we are with those. Like those two verses are very clear that clearly there is what you could say. You could commit the sin of apostasy. You can fall away, or I guess you could say fall away from the faith, depart the faith, abandon the faith, disavow from the faith, whatever it is. That we can see that is something that happens. There is something that I think also, what was it? Hebrews chapter 3 is another one. I won't go too much into it. That they talk about departing from the living God in Hebrews chapter 3, verse 12. Okay, so that's another one that talks a little bit more about it. All right. So now at this point, I do want to talk a little bit more about, okay, so now we know what apostasy is. It is the abandonment of the faith. We can even see that there's a process of how some people abandon the faith. That's because they were not necessarily exposed to false teaching, but they believed the false teaching that they were exposed to. And so we can even see that a sign of us getting to the end times is that, hey, more and more people are apostatizing from the faith. So now let's go ahead and go with one verse passage. Noah mentioned it, all right? This is something that I will be honest with you. I quoted this during our discussion, and as I studied it more, I realized we kind of got it wrong when we looked at this verse. Matthew chapter 10, verse 32 and 33, you don't have to turn there. It is the infamous denying me before the Father, denying me before men, I will deny you the Father. He said, whosoever therefore shall confess me before men, him will I confess also before my Father which is in heaven. But whosoever shall deny me before men, him will I also deny before my Father which is in heaven. These verses scare the absolute living daylights out of us. Okay? If we're to be honest, because here's why. All right? It's the idea of, I've had discussions with people about this before. It's like, all right, like, you know, I'm the American government, and now all of a sudden I've made Christianity illegal, and I'm taking every single one of you, and I'm going to put you on this torture rack thing over here, and I'm just going to stretch your arms out and your legs out as far as you can possibly go. I'm going to make you miserable. Deny the faith. You're not a Christian. Deny it. And you go, oh, I can't take it anymore. I'm not a Christian. Oh, okay, now you're going to hell. That's kind of what the thought process is when we look at this, right? That's terrifying. So therefore, what do? Honestly, we go, God, give me the strength, but also, God, help me not have to use the strength. I'd rather not use the strength and not go through that time. So please, don't do that to me, right? Here's actually what Jesus is talking about, and scholars have looked at this more and more. All right? He's saying, whoever confesses me before men, I will confess him before my Father which is in heaven. The idea of confessing here is acknowledging what? Jesus is Lord. And he's saying before men, in other words, publicly. All right? How do you publicly declare that Jesus is Lord? How you talk to people, how you act, witnessing to other people. Like, that's kind of what we're talking about here. All right? And so what we're seeing here is this is, and then he's saying, whosoever shall, in other words, let me even put it this way. This is kind of a cliche. Maybe a cheesy cliche. If Christianity was made illegal and you were put on trial about being a Christian, would you be found guilty? Hopefully the answer is yes. I hope to be found guilty that I am a Christian. What Jesus is saying is, like, if you are going to follow me, there has to be a noticeable difference publicly. People have to be able to say, hey, that is a man or woman of God. That is a Christian because they either witnessed to me or how they've talked to me before about this. That this is a much larger issue than just like, hey, if you decide that you're superficially just saying, okay, Jesus isn't my Savior just because you can't take the pain anymore, or you don't want to see your wife or your husband getting shot in the head. Oh, well, that means you're going to hell now. That's not really what he's talking about here. So keep that in mind with these verses. These are verses that, again, are very popular with apostasy. Most people would say this doesn't really deal with apostasy. Yeah.
You know what's great there is it's another example of Jesus in departing from rote law actually raised the standard on believers. Like when he talks about hate is actually murder. Something like that here. Like you're just, if you could be guilty of this even living in a place where it's okay to be a Christian.
Yes, absolutely. No, you're right. A lot of this is about him upping the ante, so to speak. There's a deeper thing going on here when we're looking at the law. It wasn't just a superficial, let's just follow the laws here. There has to be something there. Yeah, you're right. So Christ was doing that, and so he's encouraging a deeper understanding and relationship with him through what he's talking about. All right? So, with that, let's just go back to the movie. Now that we kind of see a little bit of what apostasy is, we can talk a little bit more about what apostasy is not. Let me ask you all, now that I've talked about what I've talked about, let's look at the priest again in silence. All right? He's seeing people before him who are being tortured. They are telling him, if you step on this picture of Jesus, we will stop torturing people. Qui-Gon Jinn is speaking to him and saying, you need to stop. Sorry, that's a Star Wars reference. All right. Liam Neeson's character, I can't remember his name, he's telling him, why are you doing this? Just put your foot on the whole thing. And by the way, he's probably gone through months of psychological torture going through this. Puts his foot on a picture of Jesus and immediately crumples to the ground in a ball of snot and tears. Was that apostasy? What do you think?
No.
You guys know my answer, no.
Yeah, I know. You made that clear. Anybody think that he committed apostasy?
I think to him it was, but maybe we're looking at it.
That's actually a good point. That's actually something that we can, and something we'll probably even talk about as we go through this. There's a lot of this that's really about the heart. It's about what's going on here.
Personally, he definitely felt like he did.
Yeah, and think about that for a second, by the idea of him actually immediately like crying about it, that begins to suggest
So it
his
doesn't
heart
matter
really.
what we think.
Right. Does anybody think differently? Logan, do you think differently?
I don't know what I think.
You don't know what you think.
I don't
Okay.
know what I think. Because there's a lot that goes into both sides. Like,
Yeah.
you were just talking about, it's like, let's say you get saved and you sit at home the rest of your life. It's like, who am I to say you were never saved? But like, there's some questions. Like you just said, Jesus wants there to be this public confession, public,
Right.
actions of your faith that demonstrate that. And it's like, I don't know.
I don't think having respect for an idol is essentially that, like, especially when we're talking about Christ's verse of like, how you live before men, how you act. I mean, they know they're Christians. They essentially put your foot on this idol.
Right.
That's
I
essentially
know what you mean by that, but like, so I kind of like approach it as if, that's the short version of saying, I reject Jesus. I reject my faith. And I know that they didn't make them say that, and they put emphasis on like the way the Japanese view things.
Well, even in the movie though, to push your side up a little bit, they have them for the rest of their life. He not only has to hide he remains a Christian, spoiler alert, secretly, but they make him write disavowments of the faith.
That's the most problematic part, I think, of his life, is that he kept
and that's, to me, I obviously I know that there's nothing special about this picture of Jesus that doesn't probably look anything like him, but I just kind of view it as, this is what they mean by this. They mean, if you step on this, you reject the faith. Step on this. That's just kind of how I take it.
Right.
But again, I don't really know what I think. Like Eldon said, it has to do with what his heart felt. Maybe he was like, man, I really am rejecting Jesus for these people's lives, but maybe he was like, I hope this is okay.
And if you remember, in his mind, he felt like Jesus was telling him, just do it. And you know what I mean? Which is weird.
He says, the voice of Jesus in his head is essentially, I've already done this suffering. Right. I don't mind.
Right.
The only difference to me is like, Jesus takes on our sins and like without lying in a way, and I know that you don't say any lies by stepping, but like if his disavowments, writing those out, like that's deception. And so I know you didn't ask, was it wrong, because
that's the thing.
It was wrong.
Right. And that in a way is almost like another question to ask that I would be more in line with you. Like, and this is kind of how I viewed it. Did he commit apostasy? I don't believe that, because of what his mindset was. And also, in fact, Connor said this a little bit already, the fact that he was in that position already shows that he publicly had basically said, I'm a Christian. Like, he made that clear. But I would also say this, I would say that probably what he did was wrong.
Yeah.
But again, the grace of God says, ask for forgiveness.
Part of my my thought process is like you just brought up, the context of like, if you deny me before men, I'll deny you before the Father. And it's like, to me, I just feel like, why would he not say, if you deny me in your heart, I'll deny you before the Father? Like, right. And I know that like your point is that the context is, well, if you don't express them in your everyday life, but it's like, well, can you be saved and not go to church? Probably. And so it's like, I don't know. To me, it's like I obviously don't know enough about that and every context of every verse. But to me, it's just like he puts emphasis on denying him publicly, and I don't know.
So, like the verses, like more to what Ace is saying, like the verses before that are like, fear them not thereof, for there is nothing covered. There shall not be revealed, and hid, there shall not be known. What I tell you in darkness, that speak ye in light. And what ye hear in the ear, ye preach upon the housetops. Fear not them that kill the body, but them which are able to kill the soul. So I think that those verses are a little more the context of like, you've learned this privately, it doesn't stay there.
It shouldn't stay there. Right. And I think that's kind of the full context of it. But I will say, I would be more in the line of like, did he commit apostasy? No, but I would also say, without judging, because, I mean,
Sure.
I may have done the same thing because of what
Absolutely.
the horrible thing we were going through,
Absolutely.
but I would also say that what he did was wrong, if that makes sense. Yes, Tony Joe.
So, I mean, I don't think that he committed apostasy, but I feel like, to Logan's point, like what complicates this whole question is that, like, throughout church history, we've seen like multiple like missionaries
Yeah.
and priests who did take that verse quite literally.
Yeah.
You know, denying Christ before men, and he would deny you. And so they've gone to their deaths over similar things.
Right.
So I think that also like is in the back of our minds.
Yeah, and
it's wrong.
Yeah, and I think you could, again, I think you could even maybe tie that back to then saying, this sounds really mean, but like maybe if somebody does deny Christ in the way of like, so I can avoid torture, but I don't really mean it. Again, you know, God can convict them and say, people died, and you weren't willing to do that. And so again, that's kind of where it begins. Now again, specifically in this case, it was like, he wasn't going to die. It was other people that were going to die. And so then that complicates it, because some people might argue he did do the right thing, because by stepping on a picture of Jesus, he saved people's lives. But again, there's a whole onion layers of craziness with all of that. But yeah, does anybody have anything else they want to add to that? I do think, and I think Eldon was very just spot on with, and we probably will touch on this, I do think it's very much a hard issue with this stuff, right? But I would say that maybe on the surface you begin to say, you know, based on what we're seeing, what biblically it said, what we even see the secular definition of what apostasy is, you wonder if somebody, in fact, you know what, let's say this. Did Peter commit apostasy? Because Peter denied him 3 times.
Yeah, this is the hardest thing. The thing that I'm having a hard time with is if apostasy is rejecting your faith at that moment, and it's based off of, you know, okay, you know, is your faith, like, do people know you're a Christian or whatever? Don't those people around it, I mean, regardless if it's stepping on an idol or straight up saying, I'm not a Christian, okay, the context is the same for the people watching. So I'm just struggling to see what the difference is between this not being an apostasy and an actual.
So you're talking about how it affects other people.
Yeah, and like, yeah, just the general definition of it, because like, to me, I don't know, it's tough, because like, it can seem like rejecting the faith, you know, I almost feel like it's more for the audience, you know what I'm saying? Like, obviously, at least in the context of, here.
What did Peter do? Like you were saying, like.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like, isn't that the best example we have of
And
apostasy,
fun fact,
you know?
in the movie,
it's almost the same thing.
the Chichiro character, how many times did he?
And he
That's
kept
true.
leaving.
That's true.
And by
That's
the way,
the point.
it was for
He's a
essentially,
picture
it was
of
for
Peter.
essentially the same reason that Peter did it. Fear.
Yeah.
I'm scared. I don't want people to know.
Yeah.
So, you know, I'm going to not deny him, and not only I'm going to deny him, now I'm going to start throwing out swear words, so you know I'm clearly not associated with him. It was all associated with fear, and what happened? When the cock crowed, what did he do? He immediately regretted it and realized, oh my gosh, what have I done? And so then that also then begins to, again, the whole idea of like,
This is the same word. I looked at the Greek word for denying. Whosoever shall deny me before men.
yeah.
This is the same word used when Peter denies before the cock crows.
Very
Greek
interesting.
word.
That is why it's always cool to look at the actual translations to begin to see.
He denied, saying, I know not, neither understand what thou sayest, and he went out into the porch and the cock crew.
Yeah.
It's the same word.
Not to throw a wrench in it, but
Yeah.
I was just going to bring it up because I thought of it. Brant mentioned the possibility of Peter not being saved prior to this.
Prior to it.
Right.
Interesting. Okay.
Which I don't know I don't know what the significance would be of him denying if he wasn't.
That's That's an interesting point.
That's
This
an
is even
interesting point. The idea he wasn't saved.
Yeah, this is pre
But-
Peter, do you love me? This is pre
That's
that. 'Cause
pre that.
post-resurrection.
However, when Jesus said, "Who do men say I am?"
Right.
But who do you say I am?
Sure.
Who was it that spoke up and said,
Peter.
you're the
He
Messiah?
nailed
And
it.
Jesus says, "You are the rock in which I will
Yeah.
build my-" Yeah, he
So-
was named Peter.
So like,
Cephas at
you
this point. Yeah.
didn't, so I don't know. That's
so
a
I
good
would say
question.
he was saved.
That's
By
tough.
this point, he's had his name changed.
Yeah.
That's pretty significant.
Yeah.
So I don't know. That's a
Yeah,
good
the
that's a
name
good way of
changes.
looking at it. Was
Obviously
he?
an illustration.
But I don't know. You're right. I don't know the significance of. And also, when you look at the bigger picture of things, you can't help but wonder if, like, God just used what Peter did to then encourage us thousands of years later that we screw up too, but yet we can come back. We can still go to God for forgiveness, which Jesus does. In fact, in that instance, it was actually Jesus that offered him forgiveness before Peter said, God forgive me.
That's beautiful.
Because probably Peter was just like, this is awkward. I don't even know how to approach the fact that I did this. You know
It's
what I mean?
it's just so tough because like let's say we lay everything out and it's like you can absolutely walk away and you can absolutely come back 100 times.
Mhm.
And it's like the chances that we interpret something wrong is like if it's 0.0001%,
Right.
like to me, like you don't mess with eternity.
Oh,
you know?
yeah, yeah.
And so obviously the desire is for, no one wants to
Mhm.
apostatize, but
Right.
like, it's just like the risk is too great at
Yeah, but this becomes, you get in
0.001%.
danger of like where Paul gets on the church at Galatia and he says, you can't have a little bit of law and grace. If you have a little bit of law, you have no grace.
Right.
Zero.
Mhm.
So I think you can't, they were probably saying, oh, it's too risky to go out on the Sabbath. What if we're still
Right.
bound by the law a little
Sure.
bit?
Right. Or in
Yeah.
another letter,
Well,
like
I
it's too risky
I feel like
to eat.
denying your faith is in its own category.
Maybe, but
That's
that's
my
what Paul
point.
says. He says,
That's
if
my
you
point.
cling to these little issues, you cling to the law at all, you have no salvation.
And also,
That's what
you
Galatians
could,
is about.
you
It's
actually,
just that 1% is all. That's all I'm saying.
so Logan, in a way, and maybe I'm off here, you actually could be revealing a little bit of where you would answer the question of were they saved to begin with. Because what's happening is you're saying, see, I am not playing with that. I don't care how bad it gets. I'm not playing with that because I don't know. And so what's happening is you're saying, then maybe if somebody does deny the faith, maybe they didn't understand
And I don't know
how
what I would
serious
do
it
in that
was to begin
situation.
with.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
yeah, and I don't know what I would do in that situation. Of
Yeah.
course, but yeah, I don't know what I'd pick. Like I said,
But this is why it's interesting, because what begins to happen is as you kind of begin to talk it out yourself, it almost can then begin to inform you maybe where you do lean on with some other questions, which is why this is kind of like it's kind of crazy. how
So
this is.
I thought of two relatable examples, I guess we could say, and this could be completely off. It's just my brain kind of going like, okay, maybe this kind of relates. So we have the stories of the prodigal son, right?
Uh-huh.
And then we have the story of Jonah.
Uh-huh.
Prodigal son, you could claim, okay, he wasn't really like full on, trusting in his father, and
Mhm.
it's just like, okay, I don't give a crap about you. I'm
Right.
gonna do my thing.
Right. The idea of saying, give me my inheritance now is you're dead to me now.
Right. So he may have been like that before too. He was just waiting for his time to leave.
Mhm.
But the story of Jonah, I feel like, so you have this prophet who has already spoken God's word and
Mhm.
has, already pretty much proven that he is, a prophet, a messenger
Yeah.
of God. And then God tells him, to go take care of the Ninevites, and he just goes the opposite
He
direction.
apostatizes on the ship too. They
Yeah,
ask him
he
about
does.
his God, and he's like, I
He
don't
does.
know about that.
Guess who gives him a
Yeah.
second chance?
True.
God gives him a
True.
second chance.
Right.
So
So-
there's stories like that too that you can kind of relate to, and you're like, okay, wait.
So that actually, yeah.
Sorry,
No, it's okay.
one more thing. So I think that kind of plays into the idea, okay, God has this limit, don't know where exactly it's at, where he gives us to our own ways. Because then later on you see Jonah's like, why aren't you killing these people? And it's just kind of like, ends like, kind of,
Well, So I'll say this, it's funny that you mentioned Jonah, because actually there's a worship song that just came out that I absolutely love, and it's called Nineveh. Look up Nineveh Brook Ligertwood, is that how you would say it? It's a very interesting song, and it's in reference to Nineveh, but it's a praise song. It's really interesting. Anyway, so with Jonah though, this might even go back to, again, kind of what Eldon mentioned, which some of you talked about a little bit. What was going on in his heart? And here's why I say that.
yeah.
He had a deep understanding of who God was, which is exactly why he didn't want to go to Nineveh. Because when the Ninevites repented, Jonah goes and pouts
Right.
And God goes, why are you pouting? There's a great revival. And he said, I knew you were a gracious God. I knew you were going to save them if they said yes. And I didn't want that.
Yeah.
Right? I hate the Ninevites. I don't want them to be saved. So what's happening is Jonah had a very clear understanding of who God was, even if he did say on the boat, oh, I don't know who he is. I don't know nothing about it. In his heart, did he really apostatize? Because he had a clear understanding of who God was all the way through. And if I'm not even mistaken, as he's in the belly of the fish, what is he doing? He's praying to God. He's like, God, help me out here. Right? So, like, there's not a true apostatization, if that's the word. You know.
Like, he didn't drop his faith.
Yeah.
But
it was, again, this goes back to the idea of what some of these people do. Peter, Jonah, when they go, oh, I don't know, it's not because they don't actually believe.
Okay, yeah.
It's because they're scared. And so then you begin to say, is that what Paul says about departing from the faith? Are you departing from the faith, or are you, for lack of a better word, just being kind of a chicken right now? And you just don't want to deal with it. Because if you're being a chicken about it, you're not going to lose your salvation over it. Now, you may be convicted and you're going to feel horrible about it later. But did you really leave the faith? That's really. Any other things they want to add to that? There's one more thing I'm going to clarify, and then I'm done on my end. Or we might have actually went past the service, which is pretty good. I like that. Anybody? All right, one last thing. Logan mentioned at the very beginning. All right? Apostasy is also not the unforgivable sin. It is not. The unforgivable sin is found in Matthew chapter 12. All right? Jesus talks about the idea of blasphemy of the Holy Spirit. All right? Now, some people have debated what does that mean as the classic cliche statement, but I've said this before, cliches are cliches because they're true usually. So I'll say this. If you're concerned about committing the unforgivable sin, that probably means you have not committed the unforgivable sin. Because the unforgivable sin is at that point, you don't even care anymore. Okay? In the context, and I actually, if I had more time, I'd read it. In the context, the Pharisee, he's just getting off of seeing the Pharisees saying, oh, what you're doing, you must be coming from Beelzebub. You must be coming from the devil. That's where you're coming from. And that's when he says, the unforgivable sin is blasphemy of the Holy Spirit. In other words, you've actually, not only have you said you don't believe me, you're saying I'm evil. Their hearts were, as he said before, your hearts are far from me. You're so far gone. Like it's almost, you don't even care. You blaspheme the Holy Spirit through this.
And it's after they've seen miracle. It comes after what your dad was saying in Sunday school. He says, a great multitude follows him from the temple, and he heals them all.
Yeah.
And that's when they say, Beelzebub. Or I think he might have casted a demon next. And Beelzebub.
Right.
And so it's in part of verse, they watch him heal thousands of people.
Yeah.
So it kind of adds on to the fact it's like God has shown you over and over and over again and revealed himself, and you've continually just denied that you don't care anymore.
And therefore, in some ways, the unforgivable sin at its root is just simply not accepting Christ. Right? That's a sin at the end of your life, and you never repented of that sin, so therefore you're not going to heaven. Like, so you could even make that argument that the unforgivable sin is actually just ultimately never accepting Christ as your Savior. But yeah.
What do you think Satan was after out of Job?
With Job?
Yeah.
What he was ultimately after.
Right.
I would say that there was just simply power. Mm-hmm. To be able to say, I can drive a man to his knees and have him deny you.
He said basically, I bet I can get him to curse you.
Yeah.
And so
because he goes to God and he says, the only reason Job loves you is because you've been so
right,
good to
you've
him.
got a hedge around him, right.
And so then
he's like, okay.
Yeah.
Game on.
Because we always, I think Satan is powerful and knows a lot of things, but I think we give him too much credit.
Yeah.
Like he didn't understand.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, clearly he didn't.
Yeah.
Otherwise he wouldn't have even tried to mess with Job.
Yeah.
Right? Like the whole thing was a massive waste of time for Satan.
Yeah.
The
It's
whole
like how you and
thing.
me don't think Satan can read your thoughts. Don't we agree on that?
Yeah, no, he
Yeah,
can't.
he can't read your thoughts.
No, it's
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah. I mean, it's there's a lot of different things that we think, he can do that he actually can't. It's just really what it is. He's just ultra clever and smart. That's what he is.
Sure.
And so he's
Like
able to tell right
the most
away.
clever person
Yeah.
ever.
Yeah. I would agree with
Yeah.
that, right? Like, and so therefore, what he's able to do is just go like, well, I just know what your weakness is.
Yeah. And he just tricks you.
Yeah.
You know?
That's what he does.
Yeah.
And you're right. I think sometimes we actually just make Satan's job easier because we're already leaning towards indulging in the flesh.
Sure.
It's just Satan just tips you over just a little bit, and then what do? We go, oh, Satan. You were probably leaning towards that way anyway.
Sure.
Like,
Yeah, I mean,
I've
if
said
you
this
approach-
before, we can't say like, man, Satan's so tough on me when
Yeah.
it comes to porn, and every single night when you come home from work or from school, you lock yourself in your bedroom with your laptop.
Yeah, I mean,
That's Satan's not
Yeah.
doing
You're
that.
throwing it
Yeah,
out,
like,
all he has to do.
You're doing that.
the picture of
Yeah.
Eve walking right up to the only tree she
Yeah.
shouldn't go to, picking an apple and going, oh, I should eat this?
Yeah.
How could you make me do that?
Yeah,
It's
right.
like,
People say, oh, the devil was really on me today.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
our church does that a little too
Yeah,
much.
devil.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, a little too much Satan's after you and a little not enough you're evil.
The devil's after our children.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions or comments about apostasy? So here's what we're going to do. Next week, how this is going to go, we'll still play it by ear about how the scheduling of everything, it's kind of, I got to figure out, like, I'm pretty sure if Southeastern is doing their thing at night downstairs, it's strictly for you, so we can still have our sessions, so I think we'll still do that. And that's going to actually probably, again, attempt to answer the question, or at least talk about what different people believe about the question. Well, if you committed apostasy, truly committed apostasy, if you even want to say it, however you want to say that, were you saved to begin with, right? And because what that does is that begins to start to unfold all sorts of other issues about losing your salvation. Oh, see, there you go again. I even said it forced by habit there. Like, what does all this mean? Like, can you come back? All that kind of stuff. So, one other thing I forgot to say. Wednesday, we are all downstairs because Noah's going to be preaching.
Noah,
so-
for the youth?
Yeah.
Noah.
Big time.
Oh my
Big
I thought we were
time.
just gonna skip out on
So,
Let's just put him in the church.
yeah.
Let's
No.
go.
it. Let's have Logan give
So,
him his famous.
that's happening on Wednesday. In fact, I think we even have a couple of people helping with the worship aspect of it as well. So,
I'm gonna be talking about, did Tom Brady apostatize from the game of football?
yes, he apostatized.
Yes.
He abandoned it. He
His
abandoned
commitment.
football.
No, he fought the good fight and finished his course.
But can he come back?
Yeah.
Did he
Finish
though?
his
Can he
course, that's all.
come back?